Mongolia. Why Mongolia? It was one of those closed countries for 70 years, and virtually no foreigners were allowed in. And because it was a Soviet satellite state, nobody was allowed out. And so we don't remember learning too much about Mongolia, except I suppose you remember Kublai Khan and Genghis Khan. But I like to tell the story. I was just an ordinary farmer working in Somerset West at Helderberg College, running the dairy herd. And one very, very frustrating day, I said, working with student labor, of course, and unskilled labor, I said, if the Lord sends me to Siberia now, I will gladly go. I couldn't think of a worse place to be sent. That's probably where none of us would like to end up, an extremely, extremely cold place. And 3 days later, there was a letter in the post from Ken Flemmer asking if I would go to Mongolia. And so I had to go to my atlas to look where this Mongolia was. He said they needed a cowboy there, and sure enough, there Mongolia was, just below Siberia. I've since then learned to keep my mouth closed. God has a sense of humor, and he can send us anywhere. Well, we had to, as a family, decide, are we going to go or aren't we? And we gave each person a vote as we sat together in the lounge. 2 children were in university, and 1 was in high school still, so he would have to go with us. And we gave each person a vote, and everybody voted yes, we should go. And it's been wonderful to know that the Lord wanted us to go there, and we've enjoyed our stay. Now, I'm going to try and open up the program. I have about 98 slides I'm going to show. Massive surprise when suddenly the snow set in and it becomes extremely cold there. So even the rivers freeze over. There's a lake that's 2,400 kilometers long, wide, and square kilometers. And of course, this freezes over completely. The trucks ride over it. A very cold place. Summer months are beautiful. And of course, the chief means of transport there is the old UAZ, the old Russian Jeep. And you need to ford through rivers, and when the snow starts to melt, of course, they get quite full. We came there at a time when suddenly the most severe winter struck that had been taken place for many years, and millions of animals died. People were starving. I suppose, like Esther, I felt perhaps I was brought there for such a time as this. And so we had to jump out and start working. I bought some old Russian trucks. This is one of them, carried heavy loads over many areas. There was one area particularly that was suffered the most, and that was the province of Zafgan. And so when we had a meeting with all of the NGOs, I asked who's going to work in Zafgan. They said, nah, that's a terribly far place. It's very cold there. We're not going to work there. So I said, well, give it to ADRA. We'll go there. And so we worked on Zafgan and Ovs and many of the other provinces around, the most difficult ones to get to. So these old ex-military trucks from Russia that were extremely cheap, we used for several years to transport all of the relief goods out to the countryside. We would travel out there. It would take 3 days to get there, to do about 800 kilometers. So extremely rough roads. And this was a tree that we always stopped at. And of course, in Mongolia, you needed to stop at the top of every hill and get out and walk around an owo. It was a pile of stones, and 3 times and throw a stone on that would give you good luck to get to the next position. And one of the things they would do is also hang one of these little ceremonial scarves, which would then give you a good luck. Of course, if all the vehicles broke down, there were camels. This one seems to be protesting quite severely because of the heavy load. But there were ox carts as well. And so
he's mean.
we could get around. But the easiest, the nicest way to avoid all those rough roads, Mission Aviation came in with a plane, and a very kind donor in the UK allowed us to travel, gave us an 80% discount on the price. So we made many trips out with volunteers to go and visit our programs. In fact, one day, one child said, "Oh, there's the ADRA plane." We wished it was ours, but of course, we would just use it. And when the cold came, when the plane had to stay overnight or for a few days, we would have to bandage it all up and keep it warm. The plane had to be started every now and then too, to keep it warm. But, you know, such precious children that we worked for, you can see why we were keen to help. The traditional dress is the little dell, and each little dell is very warm, padded inside, and keeps those kids so lovely and warm. It can be a beautiful place in the summer months. Some lovely flowers you can see, but all too soon the cold winter months come. I put this photo in because you know, your eye naturally follows down that road and to a little central point where the road goes around the corner. And just as we follow that road, our eyes also need to be focused on the people. And so ADRA was well known as a grassroots organization. We slept in those gears with the people. We traveled with them. We taught them. The center of the gear is, of course, the little pot-bellied stove. Without that, everybody would die. Either you burned manure or you burned pieces of wood. But just a wonderful, accommodating people. And down in the very bottom, you'll see a little teapot. Of course, the tea was a little different. It was made with salt and milk and an old black Russian tea, very refreshing. It's called Tsutete. I carried my own South African rooibos with me, and they call that Omnik Afrika's Motnitse. The programs that we ran was education, health, food security, microfinance, disaster preparedness, food for work and building. So I just want to show you a few pictures of some of the things that we did. In education, we ran some amazing little pre-primary schools where little children who would not have an opportunity to mix with other kids were able to come each morning and attend a primary school for a year or two. Then the older children who had dropped out of school, many of them because they were too poor, the parents just didn't send them. We found these kids and we put them into a tutoring program, and this allowed them to later write an exam at the end of 5 or 6 months. They were able to then reintegrate into the normal classroom. Some of the older children, of course, a little bit more difficult. So the earlier we could help them, the better. So we had teachers who were working with them all the time. One of the exciting programs we took was we did an experiential learning program where we took kids and we gave them an experience of doing high wires and zip lines. We often would go to the school and say, who are the kids that give you the most problems? The bullies, those who were from extremely poor families, parents, alcoholics, whatever. And these kids would just have the greatest time out throughout a whole week. Besides the zip line and all the abseiling, they would go on a hiking trip and they learned to depend on each other, to work together. And what fun these little city kids had, and what a difference it made in their lives. There was another group that were too old to go back into school. And so we began to teach them skills. Carpentry was one, hairdressing was another, another was leather work, another one was baking. And then they would get a certificate at the end of doing this course. And what was so satisfying was that 80% of the children who did these courses were given permanent work. In the area of health, of course, one of the challenges was immunization program had fallen by the wayside. And so we hired 10 doctors, and we traveled to the countryside and assisted every hospital in improving their cold chain. What we found was if you dug a hole down 2 meters into the ground, it was 1 degree down there. You have what you call a permafrost. And so if you go below it, it's 1 degree. And that was the perfect temperature to keep all the inoculants and everything that they use. So they appreciated us taking time to help them with that. And of course, you've got to get around to immunize children. And so we donated many, many motorbikes to them. These are the old Russian motorbikes. And everybody knew how to run them. And they did a great job there. In the schools, we worked with the local little nurse in each school. One of the biggest challenges was smoking. Children were allowed to walk in the passages smoking. Teachers smoked in front of the children. So it was a job meeting with the teachers in every school, convincing them about the seriousness of tobacco smoking. In fact, we even were invited to Parliament, and our medical doctor in charge of it spoke to the members of Parliament for a 2-hour session. And after that, they were the 14th country to sign the convention, the anti-tobacco convention. So it was exciting for us to see that happen. I spent many, many, many hours making some of these little stands. Each one of them went on a table in every restaurant. They put them in schools and wherever, just to remind people not to smoke. Some of the exciting things we did in the line of health was bringing in medical supplies. One shipping container had a whole container load of wheelchairs. So for moving patients around, this was just ideal in the hospital, and they were really appreciative of that. One donation came in from Germany, from Roche, and I believe there was over $1 million worth of tablets and medicines that they were able to use and divide and send to their various hospitals. In the line of food security, having the farming background I did have, this was the most exciting to me. Anybody got cucumbers like that in your backyard? We brought in a shipping container of seed every year from Canada. Whatever seeds didn't sell the one year, they sent to us, and they were still 95% germination rate. And so we began to teach people how to grow gardens. We came up with our own gardening manual. Now, you can see that this person has a massive stand of carrots and potatoes and turnips and cabbages, and they just, it was just amazing to see after a year or two how just about every place you went to. One day the Canadian ambassador called me and said, "Hey, one of our teachers needs to get some seed from you. Can you help her?" I said, "Yes, sure I can." He said she brought out a few packets with her when she came out, and she was a volunteer teaching English, a retired lady up in a small little town. And he said, "Can you give us?" I said, "Yes, I can give her some seeds." And I also gave her a few of our little gardening books. And she taught the ladies there to grow seeds. And about 3 years or so later, the ambassador went there himself. And he was just surprised. His driver stopped the car and said, "Sir, you don't understand. I am from this village, and I have lived here for 21 years, and never, ever have I seen this. Now I come back, and just about every house has beautiful vegetables." So we changed the diet in many ways because in many respects, the diet until this time was mainly flour and mutton. Of course, people eat horse, they eat everything, but it was mainly a meat and a flour diet, so lacking in the oxidants that they need so badly. One of the problems is that the winters are so short that by the time the tomatoes are ready to bloom, summers are so short that the winter comes, and so we had to set them up with pumps to pump water out the rivers, and then we had to try to extend the season by growing cucumbers and tomatoes in hothouses, and we were very, very successful in this. But perhaps the biggest challenge was teaching people how to eat lettuce and tomatoes and things that they'd never eaten in their lives. So we had cooks come in to demonstrate to them, and we also taught them how to preserve, because we taught them how to bottle. We also taught them how to dig root cellars, where they would go down 2 meters, put a big roof on the top of it, and there they would, just like we did with the medicines, they were kept, it's down 1 degree down there in the cellars, and they were able to look after their vegetables. We even taught them to dig a hole in the kitchen floor, and they would move a plank out the way and pull up some vegetables as they needed it, and they could then have fresh vegetables right throughout the winter as well. A very, very exciting time is at the end of the season, when everybody brought their best produce to a demonstration day, when the entire town or city was invited to come and purchase or to see what they had done. We were very proud of this. And you know, what had happened was, during the Soviet era, unless you were a gardener and allocated a garden and worked on a combined farm, you weren't allowed to grow vegetables in your backyard. So it was only after 94, 70 years later, when Mongolia obtained its independence, that people were allowed to then start gardening. So they didn't have the culture of, I saw my grandfather do that, or that's how my dad taught me to do it. They had to start right from the very beginning. So it was just amazing. One of the exciting programs was we introduced chickens to the province. There were no chickens in the province out in Safhan and the neighboring Bayan Hongor. So we bought these little chickens. They were just small, probably 1,500 of them. And we took out all the seats of the airplane. You know, chickens can't live for 3 days in a cardboard box. And so we flew them out. So these are the most traveled chickens in Mongolia. Children just loved them. And of course, it was a source of protein for those young kids, other than the protein that they were having. So massive improvement. It was just amazing. Some old abandoned buildings, we claimed the ground, we put in a borehole, we made sure that everybody had water, and then slowly communities began to work together. Groups would get a biggish piece of ground and they would start to plant. I jumped in quite a few times and helped with compost making. This was a lot of sawdust that we reclaimed from an old sawmill and mixed into the soil. It made a massive difference. We taught them how to make compost, Juby's 21-day method, and it was amazing how they changed. Now, somebody said you cannot give Mongolians any loans because they will never repay it. But ADRA came along and we would do some training with the ladies. This is just sheep's wool, dyed different colors. You see the slippers down the front, some artwork up the top. And it was just amazing what they did. This enterprising man started making little children's gears, and the foreigners would buy them to take home with them. This lady, of course, started making bread, and she had an old oven and wood fired, and she would supply the town with bread. Just amazing how she invested her money. The ladies all had to do training, and we taught them how to save. Each one came to the meetings and they had 6 months of training, and once a week they would meet, and each one had to bring a certain amount of money and put it in their book. And then slowly that amount of money grew and grew and grew. And then we would only give a loan to 3 to 5 of the ladies in a group of 15 or 20. And they put pressure on the others to hurry up and pay back and would help. One lady, I asked her how she found, I knew she had received a loan. I said, how did she spend her money? She said, I make dentures. And so I got $300 I said, "Whoa, did you use that for materials?" No, she said, "You know what? The people themselves did so much. They went out and invited other people to come." She said, "I've never been so busy in my life. Everybody's in a hurry for me to pay that $300 back." And so they were looking for customers for me. So from dependent, we made them independent. And the third step was interdependent. They all helped each other. Those that ran a store, they would encourage people to walk past and come to their place. Some young men were, of course, helped with loans to set up a little saw and to start making furniture. And what an amazing experience it was. One of the challenges there was every 5 or 6 years, a massive disaster would strike. People would lose their animals. And so we jumped in to see where we could help. One desperate time, we helped with the building of this bridge. It was 80 meters long. And throughout the winter, people were isolated from each other. You couldn't get for medical help as the snows melted and the streams came down. So we set up a food for work program. So these men that you see here all came out to work, and we were able to feed them and get them going. One of the biggest challenges in Mongolia is water. So during the summer months, they all go down with the animals along the river. But in the winter months, of course, you've got to go up to the highland where the grass has grown and no animals have eaten it yet. But all the old Russian pumps had all broken down. Here's a picture of an old Russian pump. Man, those old gearboxes packed up and those old engines. So we began to bring in a new Chinese little motor. It might have been a Fong Dong Chong or something like that, but it worked, and it ran a little generator which then ran a submersible pump. So these herders, once completely dependent on animals, now began to grow their own food. They began to grow using a little tractor. I'll tell you about them in a moment. They were able to make hay and prepare for the winter. So disaster preparedness was the focus. And yes, the 33 tractors that we brought in, we loaded them on our trailers, and the trucks were able to take them out. Each tractor got with it 8 implements, a little trailer, plow, pump. There was a seed drill, a mower, everything that they would need to run a little business. So we divided the families up. So 15 families shared a tractor. And you can see from this bumper harvest of potatoes where there was nothing before, how much they were able to harvest. The mower was able to cut hay, and this poor old horse, I think it's about to be lifted into the air, but they grew more hay. They saved more hay for the winter than any other group in any other province. So just an amazing feat. Little children just loved their animals. And of course, the herders were just precious people as well. You can see that this man has faced many a hard winter. The Food for Work program was something mainly that I ran. Just during 1 year there, we brought in 37 shipping container loads of disaster goods. In the back there, there's 3 drums. That was filled with soup, a dried soup powder that was harvested in the Okanagan Valley in Canada. We also did Food for Work program. You know, we soon realized nothing was free. And so we began to use the people to tidy up the towns and to get all the rubbish cleaned up. And you could always tell when ADRA had been there because the towns were clean and neat, and we would pay the people in clothing and in food. So that was our Food for Work program. They would also get flour and tea and oil and rice and whatever else they needed. And it was just amazing. We built a cofferdam for a hydroelectric scheme. We improved the roads. We were able to help in many respects the government. And so they were very, very thankful for what ADRA did. Then building of water wells. This is a school that we built. It took about 4 days for the truck to get out there, right on the northern side of Mongolia. And you'll see how the room next to it was breaking down. That was going to be used as a dormitory. We fixed it up afterwards, and then we built the school with a blue roof. We made our own blocks right there on the site, and it was greatly appreciated. We put styrofoam in the double walls, we put styrofoam in the ceilings, we put styrofoam in the floor. So it was a roasty, toasty, warm classroom. And then we put in a boiler. You'll see it there in the corner that was shared from the classroom next door, was where they made the fire. One thing that really, is one of my loves is building. And we had 26 families that had no place to stay. They were absolutely freezing. It was brought to our attention, and so we gave them gears to live in. That is a Mongolian hut, temporarily, and then one by one we had them build houses. We built 6 per year, so it was quite a long project. The first year we did all log cabins, but wood is a little scarce there, so we reverted then to building with blocks with styrofoam in the walls and the ceilings. What amazed us was these men learned how to build. We had some Australian volunteers come in that helped us, and very soon they were the best builders in the town, and they were able to build other houses. This was a house that some of those men built afterwards. They temporarily stayed in the gear next door, and they built this building. Wherever we had a project, we made sure that people had water, and we encouraged gardening. Of course, we did health training as well, all about washing hands and feeding your family properly. One of the happiest sights is to see a town that had no water, that were going down to the river and chopping ice blocks and putting it on an ox cart and bringing it home and letting it thaw overnight so that they could get enough water to drink and wash with in the morning. Seeing them being able to come out of school in the afternoon and line up to get water from these beautiful new pumps that we'd installed was a very, very satisfying sight to us. I just want to mention about these. One day, one of the teachers said, those poor children at the cerebral palsy school and at the psychiatric ward for children at the mental hospital are really suffering. Can't we do something for them? And so this was my 2 horses I made for them. And the one time I went there, children were lining up and they were timing them, giving them 2 or 3 minutes on the horse, and then the next one would have to get on. And somebody said to me, they were the most ridden horses in Mongolia. One of the exciting things we did was to bring in some big equipment from Australia, working with the Rotary and the Philips organization. We brought in this angiogram, 2 angiograms, and also 1 scanner, a CAT scan. And we installed them, working with them. Adra was the one who imported all cleared all the customs, goods through customs, and delivered them to the hospital, arranged everything. So it was really fun working with it. And this was the only 2 in Mongolia, and so it was much appreciated. One of the programs we did was bringing in some Australian doctors. 15 of them came in, and ophthalmologists, and they began checking children's eyes at schools, and over 4,400 kids received glasses. So a very happy day. When you do a whole lot of good in Mongolia, people are appreciative of it, and there's a custom that they give you their best racehorse. And the Mongolian ponies are very small, they're not very, very big. And so in this town, they had a special ceremony where they gave me a horse. Now, this sounds like a bit of a conflict of interest, receiving presents for doing good, but the custom is that you thank them very much, make a speech, and then you ask the gentleman to look after your horse for you. So I have a couple of horses with my name on them in Mongolia. Perhaps the most exciting thing was the day the president of Mongolia invited me in, and I was given a friendship award. It's a little medal During my time that I was there, I only knew of 2 people who received it. And of course, many of the ambassadors were very, very keen to get a medal like that, and they were quite jealous. The president came from the Zafgan province, and one thing that I remember very clearly from his little speech that he made as he spoke to me, he said, "We appreciate the fact that ADRA has taken time to teach people new skills and to teach them to look after themselves." So that was a fun thing to do. And my staff waited for me outside the Parliament and gave me a big bunch of flowers, and then we had a little celebration together. What wonderful people. Over in the West, there's the Kazakh people who are mainly Muslim, and we went out there several times to meet with them and support them. Every town has its own little Buddhist statue, and Buddhism, but Christianity is growing in Mongolia, and this is our little church. We had the church building is up on the top. In the middle was a little school, and down below offices. We've now since then built a beautiful language school. We've also built a facility for children to come and stay there who come from the countryside, who come to study at university. So the Lord has been really good to us. 3 more slides. The outsider's role is a facilitator. Very often we think we have the answer, we come there, we know what to do, but we need to sit down and work with the local people. The poor and the exploited should be empowered. Poor people are creative and capable enough to manage their own change. So it was just so wonderful to empower them. Now, 15 years later, some of those microfinance groups that we started are banking money and still running and giving loans to people, all based on the principles and the methods that we taught them. Colossians 3:17 says, "Let every detail in your lives, words, actions, whatever, be done in the name of the Master, Jesus, thanking God the Father every step of the way." So chosen by God for this new life of love, dressing the wardrobe God picked out for you: compassion, kindness, humility, quiet strength, and discipline. And regardless of what else you put on, wear love. It's your basic all-purpose garment. Never be without it. Perhaps you can decide friend or foe.